The first step onto Earth had felt like a mistake, not because of terrain or resistance, those were expected, but because of the silence. Havok remembered the cold weight in his chest as he disembarked the dropship, stepping into a world that seemed to be holding its breath. The village lay nestled in a valley, thick with mist and shadow, stone dwellings arranged in a circle around a central monolith carved with symbols no translator could parse. The mission had been simple: gather biological data, scan for mineral reserves, mark potential staging grounds. Reconnaissance. Nothing more. They had landed with 6 soldiers. By the third night, they were down to 2. Havok had been young then, but not inexperienced. He had seen planetary defenses rip apart fleets, watched moons shatter under orbital bombardment. But this had been different. It began not with violence, but dreams. The second night brought whispers, faint murmurs in the mind that grew louder the longer they stayed. Havok, second in command, Vrel, had begun speaking in languages none of them recognized, words that weren't his, spoken in voices that weren't his own. They restrained him, tried to sedate him, but when he awoke, his eyes bled light. They lost him that night. He walked into the forest and did not return. Havok had kept a log of everything: recordings, biometrics, atmospheric fluctuations. But the data made no sense. The energy readings around the monolith spiked erratically, defying all known physics. Structures that weren't there in the morning would appear by dusk, arches of bone and light, ephemeral and humming with low, guttural tones that stirred discomfort at the base of the skull. They considered retreat. Then the villagers came. They didn't speak. They didn't run. They simply stood in a ring around the monolith, eyes closed, mouths moving in silent prayer. And above them, the air shimmered. Havok remembered raising his weapon, not out of fear, but protocol. Whatever was happening needed to be documented, controlled. But when his finger tightened on the trigger, the rifle collapsed in his hands. Not exploded, collapsed. The metal twisted inward like it had lost faith in its own structure, folding into a compact mass of silence. His comlink screeched. All frequencies jammed. A sound surged around them, like 1,000 voices whispering in unison. The others screamed. Not from pain. There was no blood, but from something deeper. Like their minds had been split open and filled with something they weren't meant to hold. Only Havok remained standing. Or perhaps he had fallen too and simply didn't remember. He only knew that at some point he was inside the circle, the villagers gone, the sky bleeding gold. And the monolith was no longer stone. It moved, slowly, gracefully, as though waking from a long slumber. It didn't speak, not with sound. But Havok understood. It was not a god, nor a weapon. It was belief, crystallized and ancient, shaped not by logical biology, but by generations of yearning and fear, an accumulation of stories given form by repetition and reverence. Humanity hadn't created it. They had summoned it. Or perhaps it had always been waiting, and their stories were simply a way to remember its name. It showed him things, moments across history where belief had shifted the course of the world, where it had refused to die and bent reality around it. A woman praying in fire who did not burn. A dying soldier whispering scripture as bullets curved away. A cathedral that stood untouched in a crater of ash. They weren't all true, not in the strictest sense. But they were believed, and that was enough. When he awoke, he was alone. The village was gone. Not destroyed, gone. As if it had never been there. His ship was intact, though it had moved, resting gently miles away in a field of violet grass he didn't recognize. Command didn't believe him. The data he brought back was corrupted. Nonsensical readings, footage overwritten with static and symbols. They accused him of falsifying reports, of psychological failure. He had been reassigned, promoted, in fact, to avoid questions. The logs were sealed, the mission buried. But he never forgot. He watched her from a distance as the years passed, as war raged elsewhere, and in the silence between battles, he wondered if it had been a warning, or an invitation. Now, standing again aboard Varkul's with Earth once more in his sights, Havok could feel the same silence creeping back. He didn't trust the data. He didn't trust the maps. Earth was more than a target. It was a fulcrum. In the war room, the others still lingered in stunned quiet. The old general's story had fractured their certainty. Some clung tighter to skepticism, while others darted anxious glances at the blue dot on the holomap, uncertain now of what it truly represented. And as the ship's system scanned the atmosphere below, a quiet anomaly flickered on one of the side screens, a spike of unknown origin, deep in a remote mountain range. The symbol accompanying it was not part of their database, but Havok recognized it. It was the same one carved into the monolith. He said nothing. Not yet. The war room aboard the Varkul's Rough hummed with low, mechanical energy. Steel walls pressed close around the gathering, lit by the glow of shifting tactical maps projected across the central table. Seated at it were 4 hulking figures, armored in reinforced exosuits that bore the scarring of 100 battles. Their faces, gnarled, leathery, and tusked, were not made for laughter, but tonight they laughed all the same. Humans, barked Korgash, slapping the table with a clawed hand. They think thunder is a god and fire was a gift from the heavens. I heard one of their leaders claim to part oceans with a stick, sneered Drock, baring his teeth. What do they wage war with? Prayers. The others guffawed. Their amusement filled the room, shaking the loose cups and datapads spread across the table. The sound echoed through the narrow hallways beyond, where lower-ranked soldiers paused, listened, and smirked knowingly. Humans were always good for sport. Do you remember the one about the man nailed to wood who came back to life? His scan, eyes glittering. They worshipped that story, as if it gave them strength. Worse, said Drock, leaning forward. They believe it protects them, that their stories mean something. The laughter swelled again, but it faltered when the chamber door hissed open. A shadow loomed in the threshold, tall and broad-shouldered, half obscured by flickering hallway lights. The air cooled noticeably, not with fear, but with the uneasy hush that followed legend. The soldiers at the table straightened, their grins fading. General Havok stepped inside. His armor bore no shine. Matte black and aged, it was more scar than shell. His right shoulder pauldron displayed a single-etched glyph, the eye of bloodlight, earned only by those who had seen the edge of the void and lived to close it. He didn't speak as he entered. He never did right away, and his silence gathered weight as he approached the table. No one laughed now. He pulled out a seat at the head of the table and sat with the caution of someone who had known both glory and consequence. Korgash coughed, adjusting the power relay on his gauntlet. General, we were just discussing the upcoming Earth campaign. Havok said nothing. His eyes scanned the glowing map of the solar system, where Earth pulsed faintly in blue. He stared at it for a long time, as if trying to see through its crust, down into something deeper than minerals or biomass. Skarn leaned in, emboldened by the silence. Sir, you've seen many planets fall. You will forgive us if we find this one particularly absurd. Primitive, Drock added, barely spacefaring. They still argue over who made them. Korgash chuckled. Their myths are thicker than their atmosphere. Still, Havok didn't respond. He tapped a sequence into the table's console, bringing up fragmented data logs. Strange energy readings, unexplained anomalies, recorded Earth transmissions filled with religious songs and folklore. The others quieted, uneasy now without knowing why. Then Havok spoke. They believed their stories. His voice was low and grating, like stone dragged across metal. It carried the weight of command, but there was something else layered beneath. Fatigue, maybe, or a memory best left buried. They believe, he repeated, slower this time, so fiercely that reality sometimes forgets to correct them. Korgash frowned. Sir, with respect, belief is not a shield. They are soft, conflicted, divided. Exactly, said Havok. He turned to face them now, his gaze sharp. And yet they remain. Skarn scoffed. You're saying their faith is a weapon. I'm saying, Havok said, rising from his chair, that we underestimate them at our peril. He stepped away from the table, walking toward the viewport at the far end of the room. Earth was just visible there, a speck of blue amidst the black. It pulsed faintly, like a star struggling to ignite. I was on the first Recon team, he said, before the logs were sealed, before command dismissed the entire report as corrupted. Drock looked confused. There was no first contact, just preliminary scans. There was, Havok said, a landing, a brief one, enough to see, something. He turned to them again. A village. Crude huts. No weapons. Just symbols, paintings on stones, chants spoken by trembling mouths. We mocked them, like you are now. The room was still. Even the ventilation system seemed to hold its breath. Then it changed. Havoc went on. One night, the sky cracked. The machines shut down. Our weapons failed. And something stepped through. Not a god, not a beast, but something shaped from their belief. Something that shouldn't have been. Skan shook his head. A hallucination. A psychic anomaly. Maybe. No. Havoc cut him off. It touched me. It left this. He reached up slowly and unlatched the neck seal of his armor, revealing a long, jagged scar that ran from below his ear down to his collarbone. The skin around it was blackened, not burned but changed, as if rewritten by an unseen hand. No tool we've ever known could make that, he said. Nothing in our armory could even see it. A long silence followed. They laughed too, Havoc murmured, glancing back toward the planet. Until they didn't. He resealed his armor, turned to the squad, and gave them one final look. Hard, grim, final. If you think them is our joke, he said, you're not ready for war. Without another word, he walked out, the doors hissing shut behind him. The soldiers remained frozen, the silence deafening. And on the table, the Earth map glowed a little brighter. The drop was clean, too clean. Atmospheric entry was met not with resistance, but stillness, as though the air itself bowed in silence to the incoming threat. The assault skiff descended through a bank of golden clouds, cutting across the curvature of Earth's upper sky. Korgash stood at the front, one hand gripping the support rail, the other resting on the hilt of his pulse axe. His jaw clenched as he stared down at the snow-laced ridgeline of the eastern range, where the anomaly had been detected. His body was poised for war, but his mind was restless. Havoc had not joined them. Instead, the general had stayed aboard Varkulsroth, watching the mission from orbit, silent once again. His refusal to descend unsettled them more than the eerie quiet below. It suggested a deeper understanding, a fear the rest of them were too arrogant to feel. Beside Korgash, Drop powered up his exobracers. The plates hummed with kinetic charge. No sign of resistance. Scans show no heat signatures. Or the scans are being deceived, Skan muttered. His helmet locked into place with a hiss. If their myths can eat data, maybe they can hide bodies too. The skiff landed in a clearing dusted with ash and frost. It was not a battlefield, not yet, but the terrain held a strange resonance, as if each tree, each stone had been placed with intent. Korgash felt it immediately, a weight in the soles of his boots, a pressure behind his eyes. This isn't natural, he growled. No, it's focused, Drok replied, scanning the tree line, like something's watching, even when it isn't there. They spread out, cautious despite their training. The air smelled of old rain and burning incense, though no fire had touched this place in decades. Birds did not sing. Insect did not hum. The only sound was a faint crunch of armored steps on brittle grass. Then they saw it, the monolith. It stood in the center of a wide depression in the land, as if the earth had sunk beneath its presence. Taller than their dropship, obsidian black and etched with countless runes that pulsed faintly with an internal glow. Not mechanical, not organic, just there, waiting. Korgash approached first. He scanned the surface, fingers hovering just short of touching it. The symbols shifted when he leaned in, not visibly, not with motion, but the way dreams rearrange themselves when recalled. He recoiled. Not possible, he muttered. What is it? Skan asked. I saw this before. Korgash said, voice tight. In a dream. Last night. Exactly this. They exchanged looks. No one laughed now. Drok stepped forward, weapon raised. We destroy it. Whatever it is, it's anchoring something. It's their story engine. Stop, Korgash snapped. That's not a battlefield relic. It's a belief sink. You destroy that, and you don't just kill an idea. You wake it. But Drok was already moving. He fired. The blast struck the monolith dead center. No explosion followed. No debris. Instead, The bolt of plasma folded into itself, drawn inward like water spiraling into a drain. The light vanished. Then came the voice. Not from the monolith, not from the sky. From within. It was soft, feminine, worn with time, but not weakened. A human voice. You came seeking conquest, but you bring only fear. Skarn dropped his weapon. It clattered against the stone. His arms hung useless at his sides, eyes wide with something deeper than panic, recognition. I know this voice, he whispered. You do not, the voice replied, but I know you. A shape began to form in the clearing. Not corporeal, not at first. It shimmered like a heat mirage, lines of golden thread drawing together from the trees, the soil, the very breath in their lungs. It took the shape of a woman, hooded, draped in robes that fluttered despite the still air. Her face was veiled, but her presence was undeniable, ancient, intentional. Korgash took a step back. This isn't a person, he said. No, the voice agreed, now resonating from the figure. I am not one. I am many. I am every story told in firelight, every prayer whispered under breath. I am the shape your minds give to fear and hope. You're a construct, Drogspat, a psychic echo. The figure turned her head toward him. I am what you allowed to live, what you mocked and thus empowered. Drok raised his weapon again. Then I'll mock you with silence. But before he could fire, his arm froze. Locked, not by force, but by decision. His body refused his command. A tear streaked down his cheek, and he did not know why. I remember, Mother, he whispered, confused, singing a song. About stars. Your kind forgets quickly, the figure said, but your blood remembers. The trees began to shift. Roots twisted, branches bowed. The earth pulsed like a heartbeat. Skarn fell to his knees, not in submission, but because he could no longer stand, not under the weight of it. The truth, this wasn't about myths. This was about memory. Humanity had layered the world with stories not to escape it, but to bind it. Their belief had roots, and where those roots were strongest, reality could be rewritten, reshaped, defended, not with weapons, with will. Korgash turned to the monolith again, his mind racing. This is what Havok saw. The figure did not deny it. You think your conquest ends with domination, she said. But Earth is not conquered. It consumes. You enter as invaders. You leave as fables. With a final shimmer, she vanished. The monolith pulsed once. Then the sky cracked. Not thunder, not weapon fire. A tear. Light poured through the rip, forming shapes that defied classification. Things born not of matter, but of imagination. Creatures inked in dream logic, armored in metaphor. The stories had come alive, and they were not merciful. The sky did not close. It remained torn, a jagged wound through which belief poured like blood. The creatures that emerged were not random horrors. They were deliberate echoes. Winged beasts with the faces of forgotten gods, armored sentinels woven from childhood nightmares, spectral figures draped in ceremonial garb from civilizations long erased. Each one a memory. Each one a myth Earth had once whispered and now screamed back into being. Korgash didn't move. He couldn't. Around him, the others struggled. Drok fired blindly, bolts vanishing into the air like stones tossed into water. Skarn, still on his knees, muttered names, his mother's, a lost lover's. Fragments of life meant to anchor him, but they floated from his lips like smoke. The forest swelled with presence, vibrating with the weight of everything humans had ever feared and revered. Then the monolith cracked. A thin fracture split down its center, oozing light like sap. The ground trembled, not from impact, but anticipation. Korgash reached for the hilt of his axe, fingers closing around it as though it might offer stability. But it felt wrong now. Too solid. Too literal. Withdraw, he barked. Back to the skiff. Now. But the path was no longer there. Trees had moved, not shifted, rearranged, forming corridors of ancient wood where none had stood before. The forest had rewritten itself. They were trapped in a story, and the story did not intend for them to leave. A voice crackled through Korgash's calm. It was Havok. You see now. Static clawed at the transmission, but his voice pushed through, steady and unafraid. They don't fight with steel. They fight with memory, with conviction. You came to erase them, and in doing so, made their myth stronger. What are we supposed to do? Cold Gash snapped. Talk them to death. No, you must understand, or be consumed. Above, the light intensified. One of the flying creatures, a phoenix of liquid flame, swooped low, passing inches above Drock's head. He screamed, expecting immolation. But it didn't burn. Instead, it sang. A song in a language he didn't know. But his heart responded. His weapon fell from his hands. He dropped to his knees, eyes wet. I remember this, he murmured. The creature vanished in a burst of feathers that dissolved into petals. Skarn rose slowly, as if pulled up by unseen strings. We're not soldiers here, he whispered. We're stories. That's how they see us. That's how we matter. Korgash shook his head, trying to anchor himself in tactics, logic, code. But none of it held. This was not a theater of war. It was a theater of belief. And the longer they resisted it, the more it fed off their denial. He had trained for every terrain, studied countless enemy doctrines. But not this. No one had prepared him for enemies made of yearning and flame. Havok's voice returned, quieter now. At the heart of it, there's a choice. Surrender to fear, or accept what you do not control. Earth doesn't need to fight. It remembers. It reflects. That's a power you feared when you first arrived. That's what turned Vrel. What almost turned me. You're saying we submit. Korgash growled. I'm saying you witness. The light swelled to blinding. Then, stillness. Korgash opened his eyes. He was standing in a village. Not the forest. Not the clearing. A human village. Quaint, impossible, alive. Children played near fire pit. Elders passed bread and fruit. Laughter rolled over rooftops. It was not a projection. It was real, down to the texture of the soil beneath his boots. The others were with him. Drock, Skarn. No weapons, no armor. A woman approached. Old, fragile-looking, yet her presence commanded reverence. She held out a book, small, bound in cracked leather. On its cover was a symbol he didn't recognize, yet felt like he had always known. She said nothing. Korgash took it, hands trembling. He opened it. The first page was blank. The second bore a single line. Every invader becomes legend or lesson. He turned the page. And another. Stories unfolded. Some of Earth. Some not. Some that had not yet happened. In one, he saw his own name. In another, his death. In a third, his voice telling a story beside a fire. They were not threats. They were possibilities. The old woman smiled, then turned to dust, carried away by wind that had not stirred until now. They were back in the clearing. The monolith was gone. The forest, quiet again. No beasts. No voice. Just a wind, and the weight of what had been revealed. Korgash looked at the others. What now? Drock asked, voice barely a whisper. Korgash didn't answer. He looked to the sky, where the rift remained. Faint now, a scar across the heavens, fading slowly but never fully gone. We return, he said, to Havok, to the fleet, to all of them. And say what? Korgash turned, eyes steady. We tell them the truth. As they began walking, the forest did not resist. Paths opened. The wind hummed, not with malice, but acknowledgement. The invaders had not conquered. They had been changed. And far above, aboard Varkul's Ruff, Havok closed his eyes, whispering a story no one else had dared tell. Until now.